But we're, yeah, very excited to kick this one off here. It looks like we've got Rashad, we've got Tamara joining us. It looks like, hi. We're waiting for a few other folks. Thank you guys for your patience. How's everybody's evening going so far?
Good.
Good. Cool.
I was
Let's
just
give it
looking
just a
at a text from
minute.
Alicia.
Okay.
She has another meeting at 6:40.
6:40 Mountain Time.
Yeah, she just has a
Okay.
hard stop. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well,
It's,
we'll be good. We'll be good. Yeah. Wonderful. Looks like yeah, we got folks joining, and once we get everybody in here, we will introduce everybody. We'll sort of get things rolling. I really appreciate y'all taking the time to join us here. Very excited about this panel, sort of a follow-up to a discussion that New Mexico Local News Fund hosted back in March. Is that right, Rashad? That was March. And yeah, just it was a pretty cool, inspiring discussion. So we wanted to keep it rolling to think about the role of the journalist in the creative economy and the role of the civic storyteller. And I know from sort of reading people's bios and whatnot that that idea of the civic storyteller, like, there's ways to sort of think about that and complicate it and expand it. But yeah, looks like we got everybody here. So just very excited to have everybody. I'm just going to do very short introductions. Everyone on this panel is very, very cool and very accomplished. And um, yeah, very excited to have them all. So we're just going to sort of roll through alphabetical order, and we'll have everybody sort of introduce themselves, and we'll just go from there. So I will start with Tamara Bates, who's the executive director of Searchlight New Mexico, former arts commissioner for the city of Santa Fe, and a member of the National Advisory Council for Creative Capital. Did I get the vowels right?
yes.
No? Oh, I did? Okay, awesome, cool. Welcome.
Okay, we have all our participants.
We
I guess I
do.
can't see them. Okay. All right.
Oh, if you
Uh,
click the view in the corner and you change it to gallery, you should be able to see everybody.
yeah, I do have it on gallery.
Oh,
So,
okay. Huh.
but
I
and
don't
when
know.
yeah, anyway, I just wanted to make sure that we had other people here. So I'm excited to be here with our, great ally of local news across New Mexico, Rashad Mahmood. I'm a longtime fan of Mary Charlotte and have followed her work for over a decade now. And of my colleague, Alicia Inez Guzmán, who I'm in awe of every week when she presents what she's working on at our staff meeting. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of Searchlight New Mexico. We were founded 6 years ago by Ray Rivera, who was the former editor of the Santa Fe New Mexican. And he had a vision that Searchlight would be an investigative arm that would give its content free to all media partners in New Mexico, because he realized that so many newspapers could no longer afford to do the kind of deep dive investigations and long form journalism. Um, and so, that was working out great for a while. But then, as newspapers, more and more news outlets started to close, we also realized too that people didn't necessarily know who Searchlight was. So papers were reprinting us, but people would read our story and on the front page of the Albuquerque Journal or Santa Fe New Mexican, and they would think it was a Santa Fe New Mexican story, which is fine, but it did make funding difficult. So about 3 years ago, we decided to try to make a more concerted effort to draw readers to our website, develop our own membership base. This is what's happened with a lot of nonprofit news outlets across the country. We are a nonprofit. Um, I wanted to talk a little bit about the national landscape for journalism and what I'm seeing, especially with Press Forward, which is kind of the new national effort to fund journalism across the country, and how New Mexico is, I think, in some ways, has a lot of benefits that aligns with what the funders are wanting. So more and more funders are talking about the people who are leading the newsroom need to reflect the population that they're writing about. They want to see efforts on the ground, more face-to-face interaction with readers. So in some ways, kind of the lack of broadband access across New Mexico, I think we've been doing things over the last several years, going out, trying to reach every corner of the state, doing things in person. Alicia in particular, because she has a PhD in, and I'm going to get the name wrong, but she's an art historian, and she gets called on to collaborate with different museums and art institutions across the state. So she's definitely able to blend journalism and her artistic knowledge. In that way, we've been doing a lot of things where we try to follow up on stories that broke, and maybe hear from different voices in the community. But I think I'm at my 5 minutes, so I'm going to turn it over to the next person.
Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, I put the link to press forward in the chat for everybody, just to sort of, if they want to read, don't leave and start reading something else. But yeah, if people want to follow up later. And yeah, I mean, this idea of the patronage model coming back, quote unquote, is something that I think our next panelist probably has some thoughts about through all the work that she's done. And that's Mary Charlotte Domandi. And Mary Charlotte is a longtime radio and podcast producer of Radio Cafe, very popular journalist in northern New Mexico. So we're very excited to have her. Welcome, Mary Charlotte.
Thank you so much. I hesitate to call myself a journalist in the face of these other incredible investigative journalists and people who do breaking news, which I've not been trained in. But the work that I've done over the last 20 years is more like sort of features, and when I was doing radio, it was really about kind of what was happening in Santa Fe at any given moment, from arts to politics to environment and everything else. And about 7 or 8 years ago, I kind of left the radio world and went into the podcast space, and have been doing a lot of different kinds of podcasts over the years. But the one that has stuck the most is called Down to Earth, the Planet to Plate podcast. And it's been a really interesting ride because it's given me the opportunity to focus on something which I think is incredibly important, which is sustainable agriculture, regeneration, the food system, and resilience, which is incredibly important in New Mexico, where water, fire, and soil are central to our lives. So I've been doing this podcast Down to Earth in collaboration with the Quivira Coalition, which is a nonprofit that supports and promotes regenerative agriculture in a number of different ways, including apprenticeships and conference and education and things like that. And one of the things that happened as a result of getting into this whole field was the New Mexico Department of Agriculture has a program called the Healthy Soils program, and they gave out grants to basically, they give out healthy soils grants to farmers and ranchers who are doing healthy soil practices, and to help them get funding to improve their healthy soil practices. But also they did for a while a communications thing. And so my friend Esha Kyokyo, who's a incredible photographer, she's just a wonderful artist, said, shall we apply for a grant? And so we ended up doing, I think it was a total over a couple of years of 12 short videos about soil stewards of New Mexico. And I don't know if we have time. If you want, I can show just like the first minute of one of them, or I can just give you all the link, which is goodearthmedia.com, where you can see them. What do you think? Do you want me to show a minute, or should we kind of move on?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that'd be great. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Oh, you're right. We talked about this on an email. Yeah, about the video. Yeah, no, go
If I
for
hit,
it. Yeah.
hit share screen, will it work?
Yes.
Okay.
You have to pick your window and all that.
I know
But
I'm not seeing. I am not seeing Safari. Oh, there it is. Let's see if that works. Nope. Oh, yes. Hang on.
I put the link, well, Mary Charlotte is,
This is not, unfortunately, this is not going to work because.
do you want to, is it online anywhere? I could try.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Good Earth
Put
Media.
the goodearthmedia.com.
Yeah.
Cool. And then it's just this front page trailer here.
So when you go to Good Earth Media hang on. Just give me 1 second.
Sure. I
Oh.
see the video on the front page here, if that's the one you mean.
The first video from conventional to regenerative.
Yeah, here it is.
Yep, that's
Is that the one we want to look at?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So here, let's see if we can share it right quick. And we will do it this way. And then, yeah, give
We'll
us
just do a minute or two because
yeah, let's do a minute, and then yeah, it looks like it's about 4.5 minutes long. We'll just watch the first minute here.
Okay.
Great. Here we go. Everybody see that? And then let's make sure, actually, let me make sure that I have sound turned on. Share sound. There we go. And then we're gonna do, here we are. We're gonna full screen it. And there we go. Folks can hear it. Great.
I don't remember not being in agriculture. That's where I've come from. 4th generation farmer here.
My grandfather had a farm. My dad farmed.
We have plowed this ground. We have sprayed this ground. We have added synthetics to this ground. And I venture to say that I don't know if there's any worse ground in the nation, actually. Lots of diesel, harvesting expense, synthetic fertilizer expense.
Pesticides.
And when you put those three things together, that's 80% of all your expenses.
I think that we had already started considering needing to do things differently, but we were watching Kiss the Ground, and I think that was the light bulb moment where we went, maybe this is our answer, maybe this is our way.
I see the ground as a living organism now. So what the ground tries to do is cover itself, protect itself first. It tries to send water by some of these grasses that the cattle don't eat, but Old World Bluestem is benefiting all the grasses around it because it's storing so much more moisture. So we start to understand this process and realize that we've actually killed off the living part of our soils that we need to have. And so when we bring this part back into it, the differences, the health, the vigor of the plants, everything changes.
We're used to seeing the grass in the pasture, we're used to seeing yucca and maybe some cactus. We're actually seeing a lot more of the forbs and the wildflowers and things that I remember as a kid seeing out in the pasture that are coming back. You know, one of the soil health principles is
I tried to cut it off right at that natural ending point. But I mean, that's a great example of like civic storytelling. So I really appreciate you sharing that, Mary Charlotte. And yeah, and sort of putting us in that. Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, I just want to say one more thing before we pass the baton. And that is the thing that I learned from this project and that I think is so important, and it relates to the whole theme of this panel, is the incredible importance of having an editor, somebody who can do film editing, who can take a bunch of audio, a bunch of photographs, find the story, add music, and make it come alive. And that's, that's like, I am now just like in awe of people who have that skill set and that gift. And so for the artists out there in the world, there is such a place for the editors out there in the world. There's such a place for you in storytelling of this kind within journalism.
Yeah, that's so, yeah, that's such a great, yeah, well said. Yeah, that's awesome. And such a beautiful illustration of that intersection and the relationship. And yeah, and just the way it all melts together. And I'm very excited, speaking of it all melting together, to introduce our next speaker here, who is a award-winning journalist, storyteller here in New Mexico. I've read her stories and really loved them. Very excited that she's here. Alicia Inez Guzmán. And yeah, yeah, very excited to have you. I am introducing her as though everyone knows who she already is, but I know that that's not true. She is an investigative reporter for Searchlight New Mexico, and is also the former senior editor of New Mexico Magazine. And I encourage you to go to her website, read through all her stories. Her writing has not only been in New Mexico, but also in The Nation, The Guardian, Rolling Stone. Pretty renowned journalist. Very excited to have her, and would love to sort of hear your thoughts, Alicia, about, yeah, like what is the role of the journalist as a civic storyteller here in 2024, interacting with some of these artists like Mary Charlotte is talking about, and interacting with some of these funding models, right? Like Tamara is talking about.
Sure, yeah, thank you. I'm hoping my dog doesn't bark because she likes to participate. Um, so yeah, I'm Alicia Inez Guzman, and I'm from northern New Mexico. I'm from Truchas, which has 370 people last I looked. And so when I, embarked on my career, I was really looking to become an academic. And so I was on an academic track. I was going to become an art historian, which I did do for about 5 years. I taught in the university system until Santa Fe University of Art and Design went bankrupt. And so at the same time, I was also writing and kind of developing my writing. And so I was confronted with, this challenge of having worked at a university system and not wanting to leave the community where I had, really learned the most ethical practices of how to be a journalist. And so I ended up deciding to leave academia altogether and pursue writing. And so that began my career about 6 years ago in journalism. And I was at New Mexico Magazine for a couple of years. And then after that, I freelanced. And now I've been at Searchlight for the last 3 years. In the past year, I've really been covering nuclear affairs. So for me, what that includes is everything from mining in the Navajo Nation to the production of nuclear weapons, to the storage of nuclear weapons, to the placement of waste back into the earth at the waste isolation plant in Carlsbad, New Mexico. So what that work means for me is that because I'm from my community, and this is really gets at the core of what civic storytelling is for me, it's because I'm from northern New Mexico. I'm not only writing about my community, I am accountable to my community as well. And so when I write a specific story, I can't just say, well, looks like that's done and time to move on. People will run into my parents at Walmart in Espanola and they'll say, Alicia, blah, 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 and then I get a call from my mom. And so that's the way in which I'm held accountable, is through social networks that already exist in my community. And so, for instance, I wrote a story in December called Buried Secrets, Poison Bodies, and it was a really macabre, sad, horrific story, which was really about Los Alamos National Laboratory and its practice in the past of unlawfully autopsying individuals in the name of science. And so one of those individuals happened to be from Truchas, where I'm from. And so what her autopsy showed was that she had the most plutonium in her body than any other New Mexican who was part of that study. And so I really had to think very deeply about the ethics of that practice, what it would be like to be a storyteller in my community, telling a story that is harrowing, that was, when these people were illegally autopsied, it meant, sorry, it meant that people were dehumanized. And so my job, as I thought about it, was to rehumanize and to reintroduce those narratives back in as ethically as I could. And so that meant going to the, oops, sorry, we have a fight over treats right now. Um, and so what that meant was going back to my community, interviewing people, interviewing the family of the woman who was illegally autopsied, and asking for their permission and their consent to pursue the story, and working with them for several months on making that happen. And then when the story came out after 6 months of investigation, we then held a community meeting where at the local library, where I presented everything. I walked through all of my findings. I answered all these questions because, and I don't want to give a spoiler. So, if you're interested, you can read the story. It's very long. It's the longest thing I've ever written. Sorry. So, at the end of the day, it created kind of this circular system of storytelling for me, where I start out thinking about the ethics of my community, and then in the end, I go back and tell them what I've done. I ask questions, I hear their stories. And so for me, that's what it means to be a civic storyteller. I'll end so my dogs can stop participating.
That's wonderful. I mean, that's such a beautiful example. And I'm also struck by this idea, Mary Charlotte, I mean, you talked about how everybody needs an editor, right? And there's sort of a like a pun or multiple levels of what it means to edit, right? Like, and at the intersection between this idea of community accountability and how we all need an editor, right? And like being accountable to our communities and the stories we tell. And I'm very interested in the idea of how a creative industries division could support that kind of convening and coming together. And I'm also interested in introducing, referenced earlier, Rashad Mahmood, whose efforts through the New Mexico Local News Fund have really been very heroic in helping enable and support stories. Really, I mean, like both examples that we've heard tonight, Mary Charlotte and Alicia. So very excited to introduce Rashad Mahmood and have him tell us a little bit about New Mexico Local News Fund and all his work.
Thanks so much for having me, Mike. Yeah, so I'm really honored to be here. I think the mission of the Local News Fund is quite simple, really. It's to make sure that every New Mexican has access to the local news and information that they need, so that they can thrive, that they can make the best decisions for themselves, for their families. Obviously, there's a lot more to that, but at its heart, that's really what we're all about. And so we work with news organizations, community organizations all around the state, anyone that's doing work to, bring authentic, true, accurate information to the people of New Mexico. We're happy to work with them and support them. We have a bunch of different programs that achieve that, which I won't get too deep into. But, I think a big part of our work is also re-envisioning what's possible through journalism and the nature of journalism a little bit. And so that's why I was so happy to connect with with Mike and the whole creative industries, well, and the creative industries division and this week, and this idea of the overlap and connection between journalism and local news and information and the creative industries. You know, my first exposure to this idea of journalism as art in a sense, I think was from when I worked at KUNM Public Radio. My colleague Marisa DeMarco actually did an incredible project at the National Hispanic Cultural Center, where she merged her her multimedia skills as a singer, as a performing artist, to create this piece about the Rio Grande and translating the different water levels of it into song, essentially. And it, Mike, if you can, after I'm done talking, I'll try and find the link for that. But
Can you give us the exact name of it? I know what you're talking about. I can find it.
Yeah, I'll find it as soon as I'm
I
done.
don't want to make you. There must be other names for the river. That's what you're
Yeah,
talking about,
that's what
right?
it is.
Yeah. It's a beautiful project. Yeah.
And so I think while every piece of, you know, obviously we're not gonna expect like an artwork out of like the latest report about the city council or something like that, right? But I think that but that's important journalism. I think there's something beautiful about the idea of journalism as creative practice, and that if we as journalists, although I don't want to say I'm a current, shout out to the actual working journalists on the call, Alicia and Mary Charlotte. But I think if we as journalists in the journalism world writ large can think a little bit more creatively around not only how is our work produced, but also how is it received. You know, for a long time, journalism was just seen as like, I don't know, I feel like journalists were a little bit like, oh, it's your duty to consume what we produce, right? Like, you know, we're going to produce the news, and if you don't appreciate it, if you don't, you know, if it's not important to you, that's your fault, not our fault, right? But, you know, we're living in a world where, you know, the war for attention is everything, right? Like, you know, someone has the choice when they're sitting at home of like, you know, do I read the important work that Searchlight is doing, or do I turn on a Netflix show, right? And so I think by incorporating creativity into the work of journalism, we're creating something that's stronger, that's more engaging, that has a greater power to connect with the audiences that we work with. And so, yeah, I'm just super excited that the Creative Industries Division is thinking about journalism in that way, and that we can hopefully work together in the future to make journalism stronger and make the creative industry stronger. And then, you know, one last quick note is that in some ways, journalism is the glue that holds everything together, and especially creative industries, right? Like in a more direct way, like how do people know about art shows? How do people know about what's going on at museums? You know, a lot of that direct knowledge is mediated through journalism. And as, you know, over time, newspapers and other, you know, forms have declined, you know, it's had an impact on the art world as well. And so just a quick shout out for the power of journalism.
Yeah, quick shout out to the power of the media calendar. May it return to its full, perhaps new glory. I will say, and I want to open it up to the audience. You got the Q&A button there. Would love to sort of hear your thoughts and incorporate some questions here. So I'm not the creative industries division, right? Like I'm just a contractor trying to come up with a plan for the creative industries division. And in that work and in traveling around New Mexico to do that work, just over and over and over again, when we ask people, what do they want? What do they need? What should the state, you know, in however we understand that term, it's kind of nebulous, like support creativity. Local news just came up over and over and over again everywhere we went. And this is unscientific, but the few places that where it didn't come up or where people felt good about their local news, they seem to be happier than the places where that were missing local news. Let me ask folks here, because it's come up a few times, like this pressure on really every kind of artist in 2024, including the journalist, to just be everything and do everything, like to know how to edit that video, to know how to do the sound, you know, to do all of that. And as the funding, you know, like how do the folks on this call feel about that? Like, is something being lost as we lose these sort of specialization? Is there some argument to be made that it's like becoming more interesting to be sort of multimodal? Like, how do folks feel about that?
I can put my 2 cents in on that. I feel really strongly about doing the things that you do well and having other people do the things that they do well. And the pressure to do everything and be everything, I find really awful for me personally. And it puts a lot of pressure on me and makes me feel like I can't, like I'm a failure at all the things that I'm not good at, when really we should just be spreading those things around. I dislike social media. We're all supposed to have 1.5 million followers, but it's not my nature to go out seeking followers. And I've tried, and I just feel like I'm, like eating dryer lint when I do it. So, and I think that, for me, I connect that with economic inequality and how the, people in the top 1% or 10%, or however you want to frame it, have sucked almost all the money out of society, and all the rest of us in journalism and everywhere else are kind of, scrounging around for crumbs to try to, so you can't really, it's really hard to pay somebody to do the work that needs to be done, and therefore we're all supposed to do and be everything. So, um, it's a problem that we can't solve on an individual or even a collective basis by talking about it, because it's this huge economic problem that requires, progressive taxation and a rethinking of values. But I know that there are some people, probably younger than me, who love doing all the different aspects of being a photographer, being a videographer, being a writer, being a sound editor, and all of that. And God bless you if that's your thing. But there is a lot to be said for each person doing what they do best.
Yeah, sort of a depth versus a breadth kind of. Yeah, and it strikes me also that encouraging, like you're saying, there's no single swoop solution, obviously, but it strikes me that, and in our research around sort of other initiatives like this burgeoning creative industries division, like efforts that support financially that kind of coming together, like you were talking about with that project, Mary Charlotte, and that allow people to sort of do their specialization by sort of like funding, like mandating that kind of collaboration in the funding, right? Like that can sort of maybe help a little bit. What do other folks think about this sort of like move pattern, whatever, toward everybody having to be a Swiss Army knife for everything?
I mean, I think for me, I guess I'll maybe very mildly disagree with Mary Charlotte and say that I think, well, I mean, it's not just well, okay, I guess in an ideal world, I do think if we had the luxury to specialize, it would be good in a sense. But this isn't something unique to journalism, right? Like, I mean, it's really about technology, right? And that in all of our professional lives, I think, we can all say, I'm not a working journalist anymore, but I have to be comfortable like maintaining our website, doing the finances for our organization, writing. And so I think it's a phenomenon of the modern world that like specialization has been lost in many ways. And so, but I do think there is, especially with, I mean, really photojournalism and video are the two things that I would call out as specialized skills that I think when you have journalists trying to like grow beyond their initial skill sets, those are the two that really take a lot of like experience and detailed knowledge to do really well. And so, so often I've seen journalism where, you have this amazing, incredibly well-reported story, and then, you have some solid photographs of the subject matter or something like that, right? But if you had had a dedicated photojournalist or a dedicated videographer, that they could have really elevated that, into that realm of art that we were discussing earlier. So yeah, I guess I definitely see both sides of it. But I think if there was funding or potential for these like sort of cross-sector collaborations, that would be amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We've got a question from Jessica Roybal. Where do we find collaboration opportunities, between artists and writers? And that's a good question. So, like, if you are an artist looking to work with journalists, like, where do you start? Do you guys think?
Well, you're welcome to get in touch with me. My email is rashad@nmlocalnews.org. And, we're really quite well networked with, most of the journalists around the state. And if it's something you're interested in, I'm happy to talk, and I can, we maintain sort of like a listserv of journalists around the state. I'm happy to put people in touch, or if there's like a specific community that you live in and are interested in exploring more, we could brainstorm a little bit about who the right person to get in touch with would be. But yeah, I would just say reach out to journalists in your community. I'm sure they'd be happy to hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely. What about,
Do you want to say something, Tamara?
Oh, I did. I just wanted to mention that Searchlight often uses illustration, especially if it's a story about, we've done a lot of work with the Children Youth Families Department, kids in foster care. It's not a situation where you can go in and photograph people, because we do have a staff photographer. But there's many cases, or even Alicia's work on, Lanel, you can't just go up there and photograph anything. So we do often need illustrators, and we would love to work with more New Mexico-based illustrators to do work for our stories.
how do you like, at Searchlight, go out and find illustrator, or are there enough illustrators like coming to you that you don't really have to go out and find them?
I don't have as much of the history on that. I mean, we have maybe 3 people that we've worked with in the past. And so we'll reach out to them for, we usually have an idea of what we want the illustration to show. Yeah.
Cool. I was just curious, like if it's sort of like a submission basis, or if, it's like, yeah, I mean, to Rashad's point about just being in touch with your local journalists, and just being in community. I think that sort of collective survival is, I mean, that's sort of, I'm thinking again, Alicia, about your story of bringing the story back to your community because it was your community story, What is let me put it out to you guys here, and this will probably be sort of the last question, and it's, of course, hilariously enormous question to end on, but what is the state's role in all of this? So, as journalists are facing like the evolution, to put it mildly, of the end of this advertising model, and suddenly patronage is coming back, and it feels like we're in medieval times again and all that. Like, what is the state's role, do you guys feel, in supporting this kind of civic storytelling that we've seen such beautiful examples of tonight?
I mean, I don't want to monopolize the discussion. If anyone else wants to jump in, feel free, but I can talk a little bit about we have received some support from the state already. You know, we run a fellowship program to support early career journalists. And we've been super fortunate. I mean, the funding actually goes directly to the UNM journalism department. We've just sort of helped facilitate that process. But we received junior bill funding and then grow bill funding this last legislative session to support that fellowship program, which is a job training initiative. It's a investment in the young people of New Mexico and their career and technical skills. And obviously it's meeting a tremendous need for more journalists around the state. So that's one way. You know, we're always open to new ideas. Some states have explored payroll tax credits to support journalists at different newspapers or all forms of media. Some cities have changed how they spend their marketing budgets to only focus more on local and ethnic media outlets. And so there's a lot of sort of policy menu options that are starting to form out there. And you know, we're always eager for new ideas, so feel free to get in. I'm always happy to hear other policy ideas.
I think I mean, we did that one little thing I showed you as part of a state-sponsored project, but those things aren't common. We just happened to see it and be there at the right moment. I don't think they're even doing communications grant anymore in Healthy Soils, which is such a niche thing anyway. But you know, I think if you think about patronage, you don't really have to go back to the Middle Ages. You can look at the BBC. You know, the BBC is a nationally funded, like, that is a tremendous news source. I don't even know how it's evolving, but it used to be that if you had a television, you paid a tax, and that tax went into the journalism fund, which was the BBC. And so they have this extensive taxpayer funded news, you know, which Americans are suspicious of anything that is government supported news because, you know, it could be biased toward whatever, but it sort of seems to be the other way around. It's like the private ones tend to be more biased. So I do think that eventually, if we can ever sort of get back to a place of reasonable, rational civic discussion on a national and state level, we might have to go to taxpayer funded news. And I would love to see that if it could be administered in a way that was fair and that really filtered down to local news, you know, news production.
I'll
Yeah,
say
that
something about that.
yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was thinking, on the one hand, you know, I have the skepticism of a journalist that wants to always remain independent. And so I think that, we're even in the advertising model of the past, there were cases where, you know, there's pay to play. And so I think, you know, when we think about these other models where the state could potentially step in, we have to create a system in which we maintain the independence of our journalism in such a way that we can continue to criticize and hold power to account and to be able to tell the stories that we need to tell without feeling sanctioned in any way. So I think that's like on the one hand, you have the model of the BBC, but then on the other hand, you have the model of other state sanctioned media outlets that are really constrained in what, you know, they're able to talk about and tell. And so I think there has to be some kind of, checks and balances in terms of how, organizations can use money in ways that allow freedom of expression and where there isn't censorship, right? Because like at the end of the day, we have to be able to hold power to account, and that includes the state. So we need to create that model and create that space in between and that distance. But I think that, you know, like having programs that train young people are great. Having programs that pay for the tools of our trade. You know, we need expensive stuff sometimes. You know, one of our staff photographer, his drone crashed, and like thankfully he had insurance, but like all of those things that, you know, make our journalism work for us like cost money. And so, you know, if we could have grants that pay for those tools, you know, even as a journalist, you know, I often will take my own photographs. And so I want to be able to develop that skill too, you know, so I think there's just like ways in which we can develop skill sets and toolboxes. And maybe that's not a direct kind of channeling of money into journalism itself. I don't know. But certainly, you know, at the end of the day, when I look across the field of journalism in New Mexico, I don't see enough people of color. I don't see enough community reporters. I don't see enough people telling stories from, you know, like me, like Truchas, like that just doesn't exist. And so if we create a model that invests in that kind of storytelling across the board, whether it's from the state or otherwise, and then we truly believe in it and truly apply it, I think that that's really important because, you know, sometimes we get funders who say certain things, but, you know, what at the end of the day are we doing to actually create equity in journalism across the board in such a way that it reflects our communities?
Yeah, really well said. Yeah, I mean, 100% on all of that, and I feel like that's a pretty great place to sort of leave us as well. We have a couple more comments in the Q&A. Shout out to Susan for pointing out correctly that it is hard for people to put a dime in the slot for something. And yeah, that's sort of a, you know, ties into everything that we're saying and the problem that we're trying to solve. And shout out to Juliana for putting themselves out there as a contact. And yeah, I think that, you know, these are all great ideas, and especially some of these concrete ideas. I had no idea about the BBC TV thing. I wonder, I'm gonna go research that, how that works, like where that tax is passed down to, if it's like passed down to the consumer and then whatnot. But you know, the equipment, this idea of payroll taxes, or even like you mentioned, the insurance and support around things like that, right? You know, that are sort of focused around supporting later on in that process, right? So yeah, I think that, yeah, just really grateful for all four of you joining us here this evening. And I encourage you to, I think maybe let's end, we can put our contact information if you want to in the chat. Folks can reach out and sort of follow up. I think I can, if I make everyone a co-host, you can direct your chat to everyone, and then, you know, don't feel any pressure if you don't want to put your contact information, obviously. But if folks want to keep following up and keep building these coalitions and communities together, I think that's the kind of advocacy that'll really sort of help resist some of these sort of structural forces that we've all brought up tonight. So thank you so much. Thank you to Tamara. Thank you to Mary Charlotte. Thank you to Alicia. Thank you to Rashad for joining us here tonight. And we're gonna send out the recording to everybody. We're gonna do a follow-up with all the participants. And yeah, we're gonna keep the conversation going and hopefully you know, sort of keep seeing this support for civic storytelling from the Creative Industries Division. Cool. Does anybody want a burning desire to get a last word in? Cool.
No, just
All
thank
right.
you, Mike. Thank you.
Yeah,
thanks
thank you
for
guys so
doing
much.
this.
Startups.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and roll on to the next panel. which I encourage people to follow me to if they have the energy for. It's about therapy and education business opportunities for artists, which is also really cool. We got some really cool people there. And so, yeah, we'll see you hopefully throughout the rest of this week. Thank you all so much. All right, take care. Bye.